Pawns support you throughout your adventures and may come to your aid when you are in trouble.
Ladies, gentlemen, and arisen of all ages, it's been over a decade since the release of the original Dragons Dogma, and finally, after years and years of silently hoping from the significantly sized cult fanbase of the game, we finally had the wondrous announcement of a sequel, Dragons Dogma 2. Over the past few months since then, we've had a bit of information here and there, some gameplay, some story bits, and a whole lot of exciting stuff, honestly, both for fans of the original game, and even for those who've never played it but have just become enthralled by massive bird ladies and Medusa in need of a new skincare routine. Don't worry, I get it. I'm not judging you. So today we're going to go back and round up all the majority of the important information that we currently know about Dragons Dogma 2, all leading up to the recent gameplay showcase at Tokyo Game Show, and just have a chat about what this game is shaping up to be so far, when we expect to see it, and what is a reasonable spot to be sitting on the hype meter for this whole thing. First up, we should talk about its expected release, as that is arguably the biggest question. We don't currently have a full-on release date for the game, but we do know that the game is intended to release in 2024, so, next year. We know from Capcom's shareholder meetings that Capcom has a game slated for release in the first quarter of that year, but that it has actually not been announced to the public yet what that game even is, so it is extremely unlikely it's going to be Dragons Dogma 2 for that reason, because we already know about this game, which places it likely being in the later half of the year, so that is what I would go into this expecting, though of course nothing is set in stone until we actually hear a specific date from the developers themselves. With that covered, let's talk about the game. Like its predecessor, Dragons Dogma 2 is going to be a relatively contained solo experience, a single-player game, meaning that you can't actively play with other people, but they can have some influence on your game through the pawn system, which are essentially just AI companions that you can specialize as you choose, and players can borrow these pawns from their friends and use each other's, which is actually a really fun system. From what we know so far, Dragons Dogma 2 will take you through a somewhat familiar, overarching story plot, but of course, with tons of changes along the way to the individual events. That story is your character being an arisen, living in the land of Grancis. This makes you a person whose heart was removed from your body by a dragon, specifically Grigory, and then this is where things get a bit complex if you didn't play the first game. I'm sure that this game will go into it on a deeper level, but this world has a very interesting sort of cycle to it. In the first game there was quite a number of different endings, not a single one of them refraining from being absolutely wacky. I mean, predicting these things would not be an easy task for anyone, but of course with something like that getting a sequel, it means one of the endings has to be chosen as canon in order for the story to make logical sense in its continuation, and the one that seems to have been made canon is the one where a character dies and does not actually really succeed. The canon ending of Dragons Dogma 1, as we can work out from this, some sort of conversations that we've seen in the trailers, is the cyclical ending and the one where you don't actually complete the cycle. In the first game, your heart is removed by a dragon and you have to go on a grand quest that ends with you, well, dying. The idea is that the world that the game takes place in is in a constant cycle. What is essentially the god of this world, or at least the king of the human nation, the seneschal, is an arisen, just like the player, with the ability to create life or cause massive amounts of death, also having their own life power drained in order to keep the world running. Of course, in doing so, as someone who started as a regular person, it is extremely draining to them, and they will eventually just sort of not be able to keep up with it anymore, and the world will start suffering. As a result, when the seneschal recognizes their impending doom, they will send out a dragon in search of a successor. The dragon will choose promising individuals, removing their heart, and then they will embark on a grand quest, in theory, trying to get it back. If they are successful at rising to this task, getting their heart back, slaying the dragon, and staying morally firm the entire way, then at the end they must kill the existing god so that they can take their place. Thus the cycle repeats. That's a real crash course in the biggest overarching plot point of the series. Of course, I left out quite a fair bit of minutia, but that's the overall concept, just condensed down, the thing that defines all the major events going on. In the first game, this was meant to be a bit of a mystery that you put together as you go along, but in the second game, being a sequel, we are likely to be assumed to already know all this information, and if anything, that actually makes it far more interesting to me to see what they will do given the route that they've chosen. Building the story around a mystery is easy, but building a story that sticks to the rules of a known quantity that's already been solved and still making it interesting and even possibly mystifying is a challenge. As for the specifics of the game in question, Dragons Dogma 2, it looks like we have some more interesting political landscapes that we're going to be maneuvering through here than we did in the first game, as a big thing shown in an early trailer is we seem to be tasked with protecting an empress, which is likely to put in a pretty big moral quandary for us as the player. Our character's morals, the life that they've they've lived until becoming arisen would lead them to wish to protect their charge at all costs, right? It just makes sense. But one of the parts of an arisen's journey is the understanding of the greater good. And if a situation comes up where the greater good requires allowing one empress to die, that will be a pretty big turning point in the whole thing, I'm pretty sure. Outside of story then, some big major things for those who have played previous games. We have a brand new race of people who look like lions. I love it. Always love a good race of cat-human hybrids that are more actually bestial, and it seems pretty much confirmed that they will be a playable race for us as players, which is pretty fun, given that they use art of them when showing various player functions. On top of that, we've got the gameplay itself, which is looking extremely familiar to anyone who played the original, whether you're looking to get up close and personal with a big sword and a shield, climbing up the back of a mythical creature while it tries to dislodge you until you stab it in the weak spot like a hero of Greek myth, or you want to do the same thing with daggers. Maybe you want to just plink arrows from a distance, or if you want to rain down some of the most destructive spells that you can conceive in video gaming. Like the first game, it was just legendary for its absolutely ridiculous levels of magic that you could achieve and perform on screen, and Dragons Dogma 2 is looking to level that up even further. And the best part of it all is that you can mix all these different playstyles together however you choose, really. You can choose an advanced vocation that is sort of a mix of all of these. Pure magic, magic knight, magic archer being a real fan favorite, or even just archer and melee if you really want to, and with tons of variations even within that. The game has tons of choices for you to actually make as far as your character goes, and it really lets you personalize your experience how you want it to be. With that said, we definitely have new magic in Dragons Dogma 2 compared to the first game, and at least one full-on new vocation that we are aware of, and possibly even more, as you can see in this trailer clip. First, just completely destroying a bridge, which is new by the way, but then also a short clip of what looks like them actually creating a new bridge, which is absolutely wild as far as the implications for what we could do with that spell. With that then, you're pretty much caught up until the Tokyo Game Show happened last week, so let's talk about what we learned from that. And at this event, the main thing shown for the game was actual proper gameplay in a slightly longer setting than just the little trailers. In this then, the first thing that we have properly confirmed is the 4 starting vocations, the beginner classes, which is how you begin your game, but not at all what you are locked into long term. These are fighter, mage, thief, and archer, and you can switch your vocation whenever you'd like. This covers the 4 basic gameplay styles, and if you're familiar with fantasy as a genre, they don't really need further explanation than the pictures give them, because the real beauty of the vocations in Dragons Dogma comes from their further, just sort of advanced specializations down the line that really separate them from other games in the genre. From the gameplay clips here, we can see that a lot of the base design philosophies of the combat are very similar to the first game. Climbing the bigger monsters is of course still a thing, mixing your vocations is a big deal, and the magic system, while extremely powerful, has quite high mana costs, and most importantly, very long cast times for anything worthwhile, which means if you want to be a full proper mage, you really have to rely on your pawns to help you out, protect you, and get you some space. As with the bridge destruction that I mentioned earlier, it looks like the environment of Dragons Dogma 2 is going to be a really big deal in combat, which I absolutely love. Sure, you have your characters and you have the enemies that you're facing, but most enemies aren't unique to one location. So while in the original Dragons Dogma you could fight a Cyclops with some daggers, have a very similar experience the next time that you fought a Cyclops with some daggers, in Dragons Dogma 2 there are things like this, where the party is fighting a Cyclops, but then the player grabs an explosive barrel and throws it at a bit of structurally flawed wall, and that just causes water to stream down like a waterfall breaking out of a dam and wreak havoc on your foe, which is just really cool. You want to keep an eye out on environmental stuff like this the entire time you are playing, either to take advantage of itself or just to make sure that you aren't in its path of destruction if it gets triggered by something else. And it looks like the enemies might even have some context-specific animations, which is crazy for a game of this size. I mean, look at this Cyclops fight here where they knock it down, and it basically planks from the edge of a small cliff over to the edge of another cliff, essentially turning itself as a living creature into a bridge. I mean, if that is something that happens consistently as much as just reacting to what is around them properly, that is one hell of a deep mechanic to stick in here that can be really fun to mess with. A big thing that we get here as well is a bit of a deeper bit of info on the size of the world. We have Vermund, the nation of humans where the first game take place within, and then Batal, the land of the Beastren, which are the lion-looking people. This in itself has some implications that the size of this game that we can actually interact with will probably be significantly larger than the first, which was already a really big game. It's going to be full of new areas while also having some throwbacks to classic areas from the first game, which should both be quite fun to interact with. Then we just have this absolutely inexplicable shot that I want to make sure that we all see multiple times, where the player is hitching a ride on the legs of a big old bird, which is already awesome, but then they fall, only to be caught by one of their pawns before hitting the ground. Logically, this makes no sense. You'd both be dead if you did this. Gameplay-wise, this is awesome. It's just really freaking cool. A new feature that we are shown here compared to the first game are ox carts. You can ride in these to travel effortlessly to faraway locations, just sitting in the back, even allowed to close your your eyes to skip time and turn it into fast travel, essentially. But beware that things do still happen while you're riding an ox cart, and even if you are on an ox cart sleeping, you could always be awoken by a monster attacking you. You'll have to deal with this one way or another, which feels like a fun and immersive way to include this type of system in the game. Then we get some real meat here to dive into, which is a showcase of a couple of the advanced vocations in the game, which are the more advanced classes that I was talking about earlier that mix and match the base ones. The first one that we have is brand new to the series, the Mystic Spear Hand. This is the advanced vocation that builds off of a combination of fighter and mage. As we can see on the website, it's represented with the mix of the red and blue shield, the colors of those base vocations. This class looks absolutely awesome, utilizing a double-sided spear as their melee weapon, jumping off the shield the fighter normally has, and to be completely honest with you, this is basically just big Darth Maul vibes. I mean, sure, the weapon is a double-sided spear, but then he just straight up uses magic to pick up an enemy that he's already killed and throw it at a different one. It's just so cool. The main theory of this class in the little clip that we had shared is that the spear is mostly for close range, the magic mostly for long range, but of course there will be various special moves that mix the two together to make the vocation feel unique. Then we see the magic archer, and this is a classic fan favorite from the original, quite clearly the mix of mage and archer as the base vocations, which looks very much like a return to form from how it worked in the first game, though I'm sure it will be expanded upon here. Tons of magical arrows, support options, just really flashy range shenanigans that make the arrows work in a way that they wouldn't obviously work without the magic, and it separates it from either a regular mage or an archer as a result. And that's pretty much it right now. Just a nice big roundup of all the important things that we know about Dragons Dogma 2 as of this moment, what it takes from the first game, how it has worked in new things, new technology, the story direction, and even a whole full-on brand new advanced vocation in the Magic Spearhand, which looks sick. As far as the hype meter, mine is personally pretty high. Capcom is really, honestly, just very reliable when it comes to delivering on promises in my personal experience when it comes to new games. So whereas with most game companies I tend to try and hold my expectations back a little bit, I can't help but look at this and think that it just looks incredible, with the knowledge of who is making it as well, giving me quite the confidence that we will actually be getting what we are seeing in these trailers and these gameplay demos. What do you all think then? Does the game look good to you? Do you think that we'll actually get what is being promised in all these trailers and such? I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy the next few months to even a year of more info coming out about the game just being steadily dropped until it comes out for us all. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.